Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We are having an evening, or at least afternoon PM session of our Atelier. This is a new thing we've brought into the guild, and we kind of recognized, at least the board did and the founders, that we used to have these great guild-wide events, and they became much more administrative over time. So we want to keep the administrativeness out of it, but certainly create some learning, create some interactivity, create some level of artifact that we can produce and actually do something with. And maybe there's a few people in this call today that get infected so much that they'll want to do something with some of the things that we talk about today. And so I'm going to, with everybody's permission, throw up a screen. Let's make sure it's the right one.
Hey, Sean, just so you know, I was watching a show in the US on television last night called Bull.
Yeah.
And at the end of the show, something caught my eye. The executive producer is named Paul Atanasio. And at the end of the show, there's a picture and it says, Atelier Paul Atanasio. And I got a picture of this thing. I may send it over to you.
It's one of those things that if it's a new word to you, I guarantee you'll see it 2 more times in the next week. It's your subconscious actually elevating something to the fore. So
yeah,
that's interesting. Wow. All right. So if you didn't know and you don't like resilience, you'll be very disappointed because that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 60 to 75 minutes. It's certainly, we had a really good session this morning with Louise from Cape Town, who led a session. I expect nothing different from this afternoon crew. But it was really nice just to get some human contact and not be having like 100 people staring back at me on a Zoom. I think we're going to get into some dyad conversations, which is great. And this may have a different flavor to it too, because we have a very interesting and well-informed expert on the topic. So I'm not going to ask the veterans of the guild this, but for the newbies, and it may rely a little bit on having some command of the French language, what is an atelier? Because this is our first one. Anybody want to weigh in on that one?
It's a makerspace.
Ooh, I like that. That's a modern take on it. Yes.
Studio. A workshop studio.
Beautiful. Yes. No. So it's a fancy French word for workshop or studio or lab. And I guess historically it used to have artistic connotations, but I mean, it was all with the design of, producing something, producing a piece of work. And so in their case, it would have been artists kind of around a professional like Cézanne or Degas or whoever else. And in this case, it's going to be a Samantha, and I'm not too sure if she's doing artwork, but she will be spinning something today. So, and the topic of resilience, anybody want to just give one thought in terms of, why do you think it might be an appropriate topic to be talking about resilience on, start of May 2021?
You mean what contexts, or what's the?
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe an obvious one around the pandemic, but maybe there are other ones too, Charles. Any thoughts?
It's spring.
It's spring.
Spring, yep.
Spring blooms eternal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny. There's a lot of connotations around bounces earlier on today in terms of just, somehow ebbing out and then coming back from the canvas. So yeah, spring has a good connotation to what we're doing.
It reminds me of bamboo and willows.
Interesting.
I like that.
That might have been your poetry quotient for the day too. I'm not too sure if.
Oh, come on.
Certainly, it's
that's really too little.
Well, the right brain person in me actually had to at least root it in some level of evidence. And resilience as a word has had a really good 20-year ride here. Certainly, it's got a lot of traction within the pandemic. But even before that, ever since Google's been tracking this stuff, resilience certainly as a word has been much more common in our lexicon for the last 2 decades.
How about resilience in internet connectivity? Like your screen sharing is just not happening here.
Exactly. I was about to say something.
That's interesting. I will stop.
Want me to bring the presentation up? Would that be easier?
Well, we'll see if this works again. I thought it was on. How's that now?
No, still black.
It's the
box.
ink blot of screen sharing.
Well,
I see a
It's
dark
a
room.
real
Sean. It's a dark room, and I have a hood on.
Can you guys see my screen?
No,
Yes.
it's still, here comes the, yeah, now we can see yours.
Ah.
all right.
Zoom
All right,
lag.
there you go, Sean. I'm going to be your Vanna.
Great backup. Great backup, I suppose. Thank you, Sam. Well, I guess you have the conch now too. I don't know what happened there. Zoom's great.
My resilience.
Zoom's great until it doesn't work, right? So 20-year ride, and certainly a little bit of an inflection there as you see it in the pandemic. And then one of my favorite websites on the next slide, How I Built This by Guy Raz, did a complete series of entrepreneurs that have had to build resistance for their companies throughout this pandemic. So Simon Sinek was one of his interviews. I listened to the whole series. It was quite amazing. And certainly we can tackle this from a company level. We can tackle it from a personal level. And then the next slide, Sam.
We're going to say Vanna.
This was the New York Times just 2 days ago. Had actually did a pretty large op-ed piece on just, don't underestimate your resilience. We tend to talk about it in positive terms. Sometimes it's got a negative connotation too. Sometimes we're over resilient, which we may talk about, but it's certainly top of mind. And the next one, Sam?
I would throw just a quick comment that like neuroplasticity and sort of regeneration of the brain. It kind of comes to mind there.
Yeah, certainly the visuals conjured it too as well. So good sync of artist and editorial there. This one was a revelation for me because I think we all admit to ourselves, wow, when March 2020 happened, at least in my part of the world, everything came to a stop. And for businesses, for our own household's sake, we really had to figure out what was going on and, become resilient. This is now, 15 months, and certainly in this survey, they did a pulse check on January 2021. And there's about 4 times as many people experience at least some level of symptom of anxiety or depressive disorder. And I think if I even blew out a bigger number, 80% of us have felt some level of stress throughout this pandemic period for one reason or another. So this is a broad scale global challenge that we have in our hands here in terms of stress. And it doesn't look like it's abating. And so this is maybe a very appropriate topic for today. And then I think next slide, I'm just going to introduce Samantha Yarwood, our esteemed expert, who's going to take it from here and is even driving the wheels of our presentation deck, which is awesome. I've known Samantha for maybe a decade and a bit now, at least. I knew her when she was plying her trade in marketing and strategy at Starbucks, and she's had a stint at Nestle. And she is traveling around the world and has graced so many different stages around the world. She has taken a postdoctoral thesis. It used to be a master's, but she loved it so much she's gone back for a postdoctoral thesis on change. And I couldn't think of a person in our guild more qualified to talk about both our individual orientation on this and the topic at hand, resilience. So Samantha, I probably left a few different things out of your bio, but welcome.
Thank you. And nice to meet everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and also some new people. For anybody who does know me, and if you don't, I love interaction. So I want to make this as interactive as possible, because definitely don't like being a sage on the stage, more a guide on the side. But I wanted to start off with emotions. And who here has experienced more emotions than they've ever felt in the last year, and or started to discover some new emotions? Anyone? Feel free to raise your hands, call out. I see some smiles. Howard's smiling, nodding his head.
I'm laughing because my thought is there are no new emotions. You just happen to feel them because you've never felt them before.
I like that. It's so true. I mean, I can relate to that completely. My own personal experiences. I've spent a lot of time, I'd say, I really understand, being happy really well. I understand sadness and I understand anger, but within there, there's so many different emotions. And I'm now actually having to put some words to what those emotions are. And what I wanted.
New words. Sorry for interrupting.
No, sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
I also learned new words, you know, not like new emotions, but I've learned new words. One word is from Sean. I'm so sorry, I can't remember that word, but you know what I'm talking about. And the other one is languishing from the New York Times.
Yes, languishing. I think that's a word that we're all familiar with.
So that word Sean had, sorry.
No, sorry, I was just going to say on that, what I actually would invite you all to do is if you go to menti.com and you enter 5924515, what I want you to type in, and Sean or Rob, maybe one of you could type that into the chat as well, if you don't mind. I was going to do it, but what I'd love you to do is just enter like a word or two words around the emotions that you've experienced over the last year. And Sean, maybe you can help Jennifer out with the word that you introduced her to, if you remember it.
Can you put the link in the chat, somebody, please?
Oh, it's mentimeter.com. Got it.
It's just menti.com. So
Menti.com.
MENTI. I'm about to do that though.
Got it.
Thank you.
Welcome. The word wasn't doofus. I know that, Sean.
Well, it's Irish related.
It wasn't slancha, was it?
No, it's a type of feeling. Yeah, maybe that word is so difficult that nobody remembers.
I wish I remembered, Jennifer. Sorry.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you all. Oh, we can see it changing. I love this. Gratitude, vulnerable, sad, love. I love that love is still at the center and still the biggest. Disappointed, interesting. Routinized. Some really great words in here. I love how everybody's got the ability to definitely express all of the emotions and thoughts and feelings that they've been having. Rage. That's a good one. I felt that once or twice myself. Okay, so as we can see, there's a lot of different thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And we will share this with everybody afterwards, by the way. But we just wanted to take the moment to think about like, where is everybody and what are those feelings that we've been feeling? And there's such a wide range. And even when you just look at all of the colors together, can you see that on my screen, by the way? I'm just.
No, we're still looking at your PowerPoint.
Oh, well,
Your word pictures are quite good.
so let me share with you the other screen. You can see it.
Oh, it's like a Wordle.
Yeah, and
Wow.
there's so many different emotions and feelings in there from, and as you were writing them down and I was calling them out, it was interesting just to watch it evolve. But what I personally enjoy about this is at the center of all of it is love. And there's been lots of moments where I think we've had time to have gratitude, reflection, but also the other side of that is, ashamed, trying to figure out empathy. And we're going to talk about why these emotions are important and that they can help with our resilience. So
it is interesting that of like the top 5 words in your word cloud, there are 3 pretty positive words there, right, Samantha?
yeah, completely. But what I really like as well is that it wasn't just all positive. It was recognizing the other side of our emotions that I think a lot of times we don't explore, but we're going to get a chance to today. So in terms of what is resilience, it's not a gender or a cultural trait. In fact, I would say that it's not even a trait. And sometimes we describe resilience as something that we can build. And I believe there's that we can do to improve the way that we react and we can be resilient. But it really is linked to exposure and moments in life where we have to be resilient, where we need to use the tools in our toolbox. A lot of times it comes from some sort of urgency or a threat. So COVID is a great example of this. There's so many things that are happening in our lives every single day, whether it's work related, family related, COVID related, really forcing us to constantly be resilient and change. But I really like this quote because what it talks about is you really discover your resilience, not only like through experiences, but when you're forced to meet unavoidable suffering full in the face. And that really is the only time that we can actually understand what our resilience is, because that's when we have a chance to look at how we can bounce back. We're calling it bounceability, but really understanding that spectrum of, am I somewhat resilient? Am I extremely resilient? And what exactly does that mean? And how can I change that? So what I would like to hear from a few of you is, when in your lives have you experienced resilience? What happened?
It happens over time. That's one thing.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, not just in the last year, actually more previous few years, but just going through various struggles, even traumas. So there's resilience in healing from trauma, for example, but that, it's not just the time, but there's a lot of work, quote unquote, involved.
Completely. So I want you to build on that for a second, and I'd love your thoughts. Why do you think we started with emotions?
Because they're nonlinear. I don't know.
That's a great answer too. I don't know. Anybody, any thoughts on why we started with emotions?
It's probably the most outward signal that you've got to share with others. It's kind of while there were a lot of words on your Wordle, it's common language to describe various scenarios.
Completely. And the other thing too is, with awareness, to your point, is the awareness can help us to promote stress resilience. Because the more awareness we have on something, the more that we can understand it. But also, the good news is we can also change it. So our heart and our brain are connected. And the more that we're able to connect that through our bodies and through our environment, we can actually change our DNA. There's a term that's being used quite a bit right now, which is epigenetics. Is anybody familiar with that? Okay, yep. Excellent. New word. Woo-hoo. I heard somebody say
it's not that new. I mean, it's been around. I don't know. It's not brand new.
No, but it is a word that I'm hearing people use more often now than in the past. And I think a lot of it is tied to resilience. But would love your, how do you describe epigenetics?
It's cellular, and it could be from our parents or going back to ancestors and or past lives. That's how I interpret it.
Just to build off of that, do you understand with epigenetics that's something that we can change?
Yeah, definitely, but it's complicated.
Well, so there's actually been a lot of research and science done on this, and I'm happy to provide some great articles afterwards. But one of the things that we have discovered, and we're continuing to discover, is that by changing our environments, we can actually change our genetic structure. And that is really where epigenetics plays a role, especially with resilience. Because when you start to think about how and understand it a little bit more, then you can take that power of action to actually create the environment where you can have stronger physical resilience. You can also take that action to deepen your connections that can help with your resilience. You can also use the power of emotions. And Howard, you mentioned this around understanding them like to the external world, but also for you internally, that you can understand by the way that you're reacting, what you might want to do differently. And you can also use those to help to change your mind. So another thing that you can do, and when they've done studies of epigenetics and what you can use to actually change your resilience, there's 8 key areas that are looked at: sleep, nutrition, physical, focus, connection, playtime, downtime, and also time in your mind and reflection. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before we get there, what I want us to think about is how can our understanding of resilience affect us as leaders and us as individuals, but also the other people around us, family, teams, companies, friends. And the way that I want to do this is to start thinking about our strengths. So did anybody have a chance to try the Luminous Splash app before today's call? I see one hand up. Sean's got his hand up. Okay, well, what I want you to do if you didn't have a chance to is just to take a look at these different areas that are identified. And there's inspiration driven, big picture thinking, extroverted, outcome focused, discipline driven, down to earth, introverted, and people focused. And if you didn't have a chance to try it before, what I want you to do is instinctively think about what is the area that you lean on the most? What is your biggest strength? And for those that have a chance to try it, somebody want to share what they discovered? And apologies, I can't see everybody right now.
So Samantha, what if you don't lean on one the most? What if you lean on multiple ones the most?
Do you know what's really interesting about that? It's a great question, because I was sharing with Sean before, if you saw what mine looks like, I really heavily lean on the top side and am equally balanced between people focused, inspiration driven, big picture thinking, and extroverted. I do also lean a little bit towards the introverted, but the down to earth, discipline, or outcome focused are like little shriveled up balls in mine. Like, it's really quite funny. But maybe just identify.
Circle, Samantha.
Exactly. I'm aiming, no, not at all. I'm totally not perfect. But if there isn't one area, maybe just identify a few areas that you lean on. The way that I like to think about it is if you were to put a percentage to where you spend your time when you're in flow or when you're happy, where would that percentage of time be? And I just want to give you a few seconds to think about that, because you're going to need that for the next exercise that we're going to do. So what we're going to do is thinking about your strength or the area that you lean on, and specifically what you've been leaning on in the last year. We want you to share with people in your room, pick a strength. And if you've done this, great. And if not, just pick one that you think that you've been leaning on or that has really supported you in the last year. And we're going to ask you to share with each other what and how. Now, I think Sean and Rob behind the scenes have been making some magic happen. And we're going to put you into dyads. So you're going to have a chance for 2 of you to speak with 10 minutes. So each person gets 5. And what I would suggest doing is each person takes 3 minutes to share what strength you've been using and how, 3 to 4 minutes. And then the other person just listens. And the person who's been listening then takes a minute to play back what you heard. It's really nice when we can act as a mirror for each other, just to understand and hear those strengths from each other, and maybe in a different perspective, because maybe somebody's going to provide you a perspective that you haven't thought about before. So we're going to put you into breakout groups, and you're going to have 10 minutes, 5 minutes each. And we'll send you a message 5 minutes in when you should be switching.
I can stay in the big room here just in case people can't make it into the room. So let me know if you're having challenges. Just me and you now, Rob.
Oh, we're the only ones here. We've lost everyone. That's okay. Ah, you're on mute.
Like automatically by Sean.
I think we've lost everyone.
That's my very reason to say something, because I'm like, if it's a group, and I'm from a marketing background, right? It's a brand.
Me too.
So yeah, exactly. I heard. I was like, okay, that's not who we are. If you say, yeah, because it's our alumni group, and yeah, I should say something.
Here we go. Everybody's beaming back in.
Beaming.
Excellent. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So would love to hear a few thoughts from people. How was that for you? What did you
Inspirational.
discover?
Rob and I are both inspiration driven.
Rob is very inspirational, that's for sure. What did you learn about yourselves or about each other?
Samantha and myself, we have so much in common. We connected.
Definitely.
I had a great time chatting with Sam, even though we came at things from opposite sides. So I think there's something very complimentary there. And one of the insights is that a decentralized system is less brittle, more resilient, but certainly historically has had information overhead costs that drove centralization, and hence an increase in fragility. But with the dropping cost of IT and IT management, it is time, damn it, pound the table, to push more towards the decentralized end of the spectrum, because we can do that and we can recover our resilience at lower cost than it would have been in the past.
More table pounding.
Is that fair, Sam?
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah.
So what is the cost of resilience?
It is the cost of decentralization, because decentralized systems are more resilient than centralized ones. I mean, this is not the full story, of course, but it's one facet, right?
Yeah.
So if you are trying to manage a decentralized system, say something like the Gray Swan Guild, right? Then it requires an enormous amount of coordination and information overhead that a centralized system top down does not require. But in a world that is populated by inexpensive and highly capable IT and networks and so on, information networks, then managing that information overhead is much less costly than it has been in the past. And hence the calculus between economic efficiency and resilience shifts back in the direction of resilience.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So did anybody have any conversations around what it felt like to be leaning on your strengths over the course of the last year and using that for resilience?
I'll chip in because can I link something to what Dave's just said, because I think as you were speaking, Dave, I was thinking you were talking about systems resilience almost from the IT perspective. So having a tech background and working with people, I kind of have two hats on. But I think one of the things that going forward will be the case will be if you have a decentralized system, the resilience required in an individual have to be greater.
Oh,
Because, so therefore, you know, I kind of think as we get to a decentralized organization, the idea of having to teach people self-management will be the next thing for the next 10 years. Because if you're going to let them be less managed than they have been in the past, their self-management, their resilience and their human skills will need to be better. Because if you just leave them alone, then you're going to have a load of people fall off the cliff. You know, sweeping generalization, but you know what I mean. So to link it to what Aaron and I were talking about, it was the idea that what's worked for me has been just stick to the basics, which is put work as a second one and have self-care as the first one. So which was have some movement every day, go out on the bike or walk around by the river, make sure you're eating okay and sleeping, and then everything else falls off the back of it. Because what we were talking about is if I'm not functioning well, I can't be useful to anybody else. And I think that was one of the things. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and Colin, I think that sometimes sounds so obvious, yet to your point around systems and decentralized systems, or even the fact that we're living in a really complex world, and it's a VUCA world, right? It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. And what's really interesting about that is everything's changing around us. But the more that we understand ourselves and we can be centered in ourselves, then it doesn't matter what's happening in the external world, because at least we have that centering point or that grounding point where we can tap into self. And I want to kind of continue to explore that a little bit, because it really is around the emotions that help us understand our resilience, but also be able to be more resilient. And as we both talked about, there's two different sides to everything, right? There's a good and there's a bad. And when you think about your strength, and I don't want to say bad, it's a shadow side. And when you think about your strengths, a lot of times you can actually either overuse your strengths, or there's something else that might be the opposite, which, you know, is kind of that shadow side. And I see Howard nodding his head like, yes, there definitely is. Howard, we can hear you. What are you thinking?
So I'm laughing because Hanali and I talked about this, right? Where I went to in the discussion was, if you're very extroverted and other focused, right, you run the risk of not doing what Colin did, which is taking care of everybody else first and taking care of yourself last, right? And so there's this is the shadow side, as you call it, of this. It's really, to me, it's about finding the balance between these two things, and that's why I was smiling when you said that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I actually have a bit of a different perspective on, instead of finding the balance, about at least having the awareness and recognizing when you've gone the other way, so you can bounce out of it faster.
Yeah.
And I think there's, especially when it comes to the shadow side, there's an opportunity for us to live in that a little bit, to understand it versus constantly trying to get out of it. But I almost think about it as the infinity loop. And you've got on both sides, and you're constantly going up and down and recognizing the awareness and going up and down and around. But I think if you can speed that up, then you can start to elevate it and lift it up. And you can actually start to use it as a point of friction, where it can be something that can actually drive different behaviors. So I love that you brought that up, Howard, because what I want to do next is I want everybody to think about the other side of it. So if you're leaning on your strength, what is that shadow side that you also sometimes tap into? Or when you're really stressed, or, you know, when things have, the chips have just fallen down, or you're overusing it, what are those things that you kind of struggle with? And what we're going to do is we're going to do another breakout in random groups, but we're going to look at the other side. So we're going to take that time to think about an area that maybe you could either develop, or an area that is kind of your shadow side that you could spend some time understanding a little bit more. Okay, so thinking about the paradoxes and the two sides, you're going to have a chance to explore that other side. And what is it on the other side that you're falling back on in those times where you get stuck and you're not feeling so resilient? And again, we're going to take, I'm going to say, let's take, Sean, instead of 10 minutes, why don't we do 8 minutes? So we've got like 3 minutes each to share and play back to each other. Does that sound good? So we'll see you back here in 8 minutes.
It's just us. What happened? We left the room, but you're muted.
Yeah, maybe no one else has come back yet.
We're in a twilight zone.
I have to bail out right around 2. I've got to actually take my daughter. She's donating blood.
Oh, okay.
And I can't dissuade her.
Oh, yeah, you were trying to?
I mean, I think it's very sweet, actually.
And noble.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I guess it's noble and sweet, selfless. But there we go.
Right on.
The
Good.
engineering magic of Zoom is you always will be pulled back in the middle of an interesting sentence.
My last
I
quote.
know.
My last
Jennifer
quote
was about to reveal the
use-
secret to the universe, and then it.
Exactly. This
think
week's
Zo- I
winning
think
lottery
Zoom
number is.
I think Zoom is taking that back of the sentence, Nathan, though, and then turning it into award-winning books.
It's all stock tips for some insider.
So Jonathan, I'm curious, what was the secret to the universe?
It got cut off. I don't know. You're going to have to ask Jennifer. And, quite honestly, if I were her, I would be a little bit careful about who I shared that with. I'm surprised that she was going to share it with me.
Plastics.
Plastics. Always plastic.
I said you are a philosopher, so I have no problem with that.
I see.
So Jonathan, what did you and Jennifer talk about? Any interesting insights or discoveries?
So Jennifer talked about herself as being passive in front of people, like not reaching out. Although what I heard, and I didn't get a chance to reflect this, so Jennifer, I'll do this in front of everybody because it's a very nice reflection. I heard open. I heard you were open. And I think that is a marvelous quality. A lot of people who are active are actually, they're in their lane and they think they know what they're doing, but they're not open to things that come from the side. They're not open to a connection that's surprising or comes from a direction that they haven't anticipated. They're sure that they are going in a direction that they want to go in. So that's what I heard when you said passive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't think that way. I thought, I wasn't reaching out and passive. But you see the other side of me, a very positive side. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other insights that people had that they want to share?
I think myself and Michael reconciled that our wine, beer, and spirits consumption has gone way up during COVID. So to the embarrassment of my neighbors when I put my blue box out on Wednesday. Myself and Michael are having a support group with over a case of wine if anybody's interested.
I was going to say I'll definitely join you and I can relate to that. I at the beginning of COVID I actually stopped drinking, and then I think probably about like 3 or 4 months in I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, everybody else is having a great time and I'm not. Now, to the point where my neighbor literally will come knocking on my door and she'll say to me, Sam, I've noticed you haven't put any bottles out. Because she takes them back and gets the money for them. And she always knows that there's more than enough. So she's a little worried when she hasn't seen any and wants to check on me. Oh, too funny. So thinking about kind of the strengths that you have and also that dark side, or those areas that you know, the uncomfortable areas. What's one thing that you might want to do differently moving forward to help improve your resilience?
Well, this is all purpose. This is keep breathing.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Keep breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Erin and I talked about that too, and just practicing breathing exercises, meditation, creating space.
Yeah,
Colin and I had
broaden
some
that.
talks about preferences, and in coming from it, I'm realizing, because Colin mentioned having more of a polymath perspective on things, and being the extrovert, but also being the introvert, being the big picture, but also doing the and I realize that, I mean, I have to say a lot of the same. And I think that what the splat is measuring isn't so much strengths as preferences.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we talked about was the benefit of changing gears. Whether if you're, doing a lot of big picture thinking, sometimes it's a nice change of pace to have something that you can just plan and execute and be done and see that it's finished. I had IT example. I would also say that's the benefit of manual labor. You plant a tree, you dig a hole, you put up a fence. It's dumb brute labor, minimal amount of skill necessary, but when you're done, you can see that you've done it. And if your day is full of theory and ideas and planning and trying to share ideas, then there's something to, picking up a rock and moving it. And at the end, the gravity holds it where you put it. And it's not necessarily your strength. It's not necessarily your preferred way of working most of the time, but the change of gears is good for you.
I like that.
Buckminster Fuller said, the best recreation is not to stop work, but to change work.
Nice.
True Protestant work ethic there.
Good point.
And Jonathan, you had your hand raised? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that we talked a lot about resilience. I learned a big personal lesson of resilience a couple of years ago when I got a chronic disease. I got IBS. And you learn very quickly that you have to confront the challenge that's right in front of you. And this was definitely my weakness over the past year, is that I had some ambitions and ideas that were 3 years out, 5 years out. And it turns out those were quite brittle when brought face to face with a challenge that I couldn't deal with, that was right there, right in front of me, and had to be done. As I've adopted an attitude of just do the next thing that's in front of you as well as you can, that, those do add up. Those do add up, and those big ambitions, if you don't break them down, if they're just sort of hanging out there, they're very fragile.
There's a couple of books that apply here as well, right? Usually they're more discussed in what happens when your career and you separate. Who Moved My Cheese is a classic one. I see some recognition here. And then Our Iceberg is Melting is a more recent one, which these are all things about, how resilient you are, how you deal with the adversity, right? A lot of people just sit back and say, there you go, Who Moved My Cheese, perfect.
So Howard, what does it mean when the GM P&L owner of $1 billion business unit buys Who Moved My Cheese for everyone in the business?
It means you got a
True story.
Really?
Well, I got
True
that.
story.
That one's from Tom Siebel. I wasn't in that company that long afterwards.
I was at
My
Nortel at
cheese.
the time.
I'm moving my cheese.
Yeah, that was when I was at Nortel, back when there was a Nortel. So that might tell you something. But my takeaway was that what you really needed was a T-shirt that said, "I moved your cheese."
It's a pretty good children's book, by the way. I tried that.
Yes, absolutely. Interesting. Wow, I didn't realize corporate execs were buying them, but it really is. It's a very important lesson.
All hands meeting with a takeaway copy of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it really is, because think about it. Like, there's so many times in business where when things go sideways or they don't work, we spend time analyzing what didn't work so it doesn't happen again. Yet for ourselves, when we hit those moments in our life that, are really challenging or difficult, we practice resilience, or it happens, right? But we don't don't spend any time thinking about like, what exactly did I do and what worked for me and how do I get better at that? Because the more that we develop those skills, and I think about it as a muscle, the more that we develop those muscles, the better that we have the ability to bounce back when those things happen to us. And, you know, then we can just continue to, like, the world's changing very quickly. And the more that we become comfortable with that, the easier that it will be.
You know, if I can, you're banging on the door of this concept from Taleb of anti-fragile,
Yeah.
right? So I think resilience is to me not the goal. It's like, that would be great,
Yes, exactly.
but let's do better. Let's become anti-fragile. Let's learn and grow from the struggles. So
Completely.
pop that in.
Completely. And also, I think I personally believe, and what I hope is that when we start sharing those, and that's why we wanted to bring in kind of that darker side of things, is because it exists. And I personally think that we don't talk about it enough, and that there's a real opportunity to have more of those conversations, because it builds empathy, it builds understanding, but it also helps us, you know, build our own capabilities and strengths. And the reality is it's there. Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. It's been really fun to get to know you a little bit better. Hope you've enjoyed networking and connecting with each other. And I know Sean has a few questions / thoughts for everyone just before we close. And then of course we can continue the conversation.
Well, yeah, no, I think we've implemented Ateliers, I guess, as an ongoing part of our life. I think once a month we'll end up doing these, and we may actually do them at a greater pace than that, just to get in the rhythm of it. So I've personally benefited from just the human-to-human contact today. So my hope is, you know, everything we do in the future will have breakouts and that type of intimacy. My hope is, coming out of today, we've got some very fulsome diagrams that Mentimeter has given us, and as well, if you do the splash, and it is splash, I believe, not what do you call it, Nathan?
Flat.
Flat. It's funny, when Louise presented it to me in the first place, I misheard her, and I was like, I thought she said slasher, which was also a bad malaprop, I think. But anyway, if you do it though, I've sent mine to Louise, and we're trying to just build a gallery of, you know, maybe some people and provide some level of, if you're comfortable, obviously, to make it public. We're probably gonna. I know Rob's already writing. I think he's halfway through the Medium post already in terms of his dissertation on the day. But we may turn this into a mini guild report of some sort in terms of what is the guild point of view on resilience, or to use Dave's word, anti-fragility maybe. And then I know when we prep this between myself, Samantha, and Louise, you might want to do some type of peer learning circle. I don't know where your thoughts are on that, Samantha.
Yeah, I'd love to, like, personally at least groups of people together. I think there's an opportunity for everybody to learn from each other. There's so many diverse backgrounds and experiences, but I also think when you start to get into kind of what I call like a peer coaching mode or a peer learning, there's real opportunities to have really nice, like, small circles with each other, to, like, again, you know, just what happened with Jonathan and Jennifer as an example, and just seeing the challenges that you're going through somebody else's eyes, I think can be really helpful.
And then we have two other realms that are building themselves out. One is called the Foundry, which is all about teaching and learning and stuff. And I could easily see this turning into some type of master class of great learnings that we kind of co-learn together with each other. And then from a business standpoint, we are incorporating as a guild. And I know Jennifer, who's on our session today, is leading the charge in terms of bringing that to light. So potentially this becomes some type of business activation piece. And I only have two other housekeeping announcements. I think if we go past that one, just we sat down as a group the other day and we said, what are the themes of the next 2 or 3 ateliers? People migrated to future of work and mastery of that. That's the #1 thing that came out of the long-term solutions of one of our weather vane studies. And so people want to tackle that. People want to tackle tech swans applied. People want to tackle a really interesting idea of getting 8 different regions in the world. I think was it Samuel there that just mentioned there's different communities that maybe don't get heard in this discussion. So we may do something around global sense making, and just getting 8 people from different parts of the world in the same session telling us their vantage point on a topic. And those were it. And the only last thing I'd say is we're growing by leaps and bounds, the Guild. We just had a month where 20% growth of our overall number. And so we do onboarding sessions every second and last Wednesday of the month. And so if you know anybody that wants to join, myself, Rob, and a coterie of friends kind of hang out and just get new members involved in what we do. But beyond that, I want to thank Sam for pulling all of this stuff together and being such a great moderator. She was part of her day of the Swan, and it was just like we're all like hanging on for oxygen because you were like the 20th hour of 24, I think, Sam.
Yeah.
We had a great time, and I think I'll speak for our audience. I think everybody had a great time today too.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here.
Yay.
It's nice to see everyone. Love to see you as well.
Great chat comments as always.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I love that. Rob, I think you posted the toxic positivity.
There's a different one from this morning, so it's just interesting. I'm gonna have to meld the two things because I was just riffing on what everyone was saying. So, and then Dr. Google was helping us out too, of course.
Next survey, the question is, what's the average number of tabs you have open by the end of one of these things? Not counting the ones you started with.
Yeah.
Not counting those.
Who moved my Zoom room by Nathan coming to online?
There's the book.
No, but he's right. We could have a competition. We could ask anybody on a call. Okay, everybody declare how many tabs you got open from the discussion as you hear things, right? Or you learn about new books, you're hitting it.
But Howard,
handicapped because I'm on the iPad instead of the computer this time,
no, it can't be sheer quantity. It has to be something like you have to make sure that it stays a prime number. Like, so, like if somebody calls it, and if you're on 7, 11, or 13, you're fine. But at 15, you're out. Then you're out of the running.
Quick, get 2 more.
Exactly.
I'd be out of the running then because I've got 98 tabs open right now.
Yeah.
98 tabs.
You know that? Is there a number somewhere?
So you're a usability tester trying to determine the maximum the system can support.
I am. Yeah, and also I do have the problem if I go down rabbit holes. And then like I'll skim through something quickly. Then I'm like, oh, that looks interesting too. I'm like, I want to see that. And then I literally have to sometimes stop myself and go, okay, you know what? Go back to what you're originally looking for versus everything else that you found.
If you were to look at the memory usage on your machine, when you have 98 tabs open with Google, it's amazing that anything still processes.
If you're using Chrome, they dropped a new feature. You can search your tabs. It's new. And it's like, it's a little down arrow. And I'm like, what's that? Oh my God, you can search your tabs. This is so good.
How many different browsers do you use? I have 3 different browsers, 2 of them specifically for logging into different things differently.
Yep.
Plus incognito, right, Nathan?
Yeah.
I use Chrome only for the paid usability testing stuff so that the browser doesn't know anything else I do. But then I use Safari and Firefox. They both can log into my content management system, but as different people.
So what do you use for porn?
Whatever works. They're all
The thought everybody had, but only one person said yes.
Well, it's going in the chat.
Well, who said there's only one computer?
Yeah, that's right. It's a dirty computer in the corner.
I do have a PC that I got from, there was a clearance store here for Best Buy for a while that was the Best Buy clearance center for the entire Southeast United States.